Lift your hearts up to the Lord.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Spread the news that He is joy. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is joy.
Lift your hearts up to the Lord.
Spread the news that He is true. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is true. Lift your hearts up to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Spread the news that He is love. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is love. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is love. This reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. This week is entitled, What is it to fail spiritually? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The first passage is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 25. Jesus tells the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 of them wise and 5 foolish. They await their bridegroom, the Christ consciousness. The wise virgins keep the oil in their lamps, symbolic of their devotion, lit through the night. The foolish virgins place no oil in their lamps. Those foolish ones are like the average devotee, going through the motions of outer ritual, but keeping no fire of love burning in the heart. When the bridegroom's coming is announced, the foolish virgins realize their mistake and hasten out to purchase oil. During their absence, the Christ consciousness comes and embraces those who have been awaiting Him with devotion. The foolish ones, by their lackluster devotion, are not accepted by Him. Watch, therefore, Jesus told His listeners, for you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda describes the foolish virgin consciousness he encountered in the Mahamanda hermitage he stayed in as a young man in Benares. I am pleased, he wrote, that my new home possessed an attic where I managed to spend the dawn and morning hours. The ashram members, knowing little of meditation practices, thought I should employ my whole time in organizational duties. They gave me praise for my afternoon work in their office. Don't try to catch God so soon, this ridicule accompanied me one day in my early departure toward the attic. Later, during meditation, I felt lifted as though bodily to a sphere uncircumscribed. Thy Master cometh today, a divine womanly voice came from everywhere and nowhere. This supernal experience was pierced by a shout from a different locale. A young priest, nicknamed Habu, was calling me from the downstairs kitchen. Mukunda, enough of meditation. You are needed for an errand. The Divine Mother's words were not spoken for the benefit of that priest, the foolish virgin, but for Mukunda, the wise virgin. For this day was the day his guru, Sri Yukteswar, came to him. Grieve not, friends, if you feel that you have been foolish, nor error is forever. Someday, if you keep your lamp lit now, your opportunity will come. In the Bhagavad Gita, the 6th chapter, Krishna promises every devotee, Arjuna, none who works for self-redemption will ever meet an evil destiny. Spiritual failure, though a deep disappointment, is always temporary. External hellfire is but a projection of vindictiveness in the human mind. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning again, everyone. My name is Nayaswami Dharmaraj, and this is my wife, Nayaswami Dharmini, and we are very grateful to be greeting you this morning. This topic today is, what is it to fail spiritually? And a year ago, I actually was set to speak on the same topic on a Sunday, and a woman spoke to me the night before at some gathering we were having, and she said, I would like to come, but what is the topic tomorrow? And I said, actually it's, what is it to fail spiritually? And she said, but we can't fail spiritually. And that's the talk. Thank you very much. But it is the truth that we can't, as it says in the reading. To fail spiritually just means temporarily, a setback. A slip is not a fall, and a fall is not the end. And so sometimes I think of it as Yogananda said, God is drawing all souls back to Him. And we may even wonder, well, but how can that be? I mean, isn't it possible that some souls could kind of go too far and then God just lets them go off? And where could they go? This whole universe, Yogananda said, is made of nothing but God's consciousness, as the scriptures say too. And it's also based on the principle of duality. What goes up must come down, and so on. And as we have all been birthed from God in the very beginning, ultimately, to balance that outward energy, we have to return. And so I sometimes think of God as us, having us all on one of those walkways at the airport, that just go, to spare us the trouble of walking and exercising our legs at all, so that we can then sit on an airplane and for hours and also not, anyway, never mind. And so some people are walking down the runways. I mean, these mobile walkways. Others, if you want to, you can walk the other way, and you can make some good progress in the wrong direction. But I think that eventually, just in terms of, out of sheer exasperation, we get into enough trouble, and we either keel over on the side, or cry, or hit our heads and pass out, and then the walkway just takes us back home to God. So a little more effort is needed than that, but still, there is no other choice. There's no other destiny that we have. And so to fail does not mean to break through some barrier beyond which there's no return. No sin is unforgivable. And Yogananda said, sin just means error. It just means mistake. He didn't even like to use that word, because it's just a mistake. And why should we feel so badly about it? I mean, God has set this whole show up so that we will make all kinds of mistakes. When God created the first human beings, so the story goes, He made them all wise, because He wanted to have some kind of outward drama, so He put these people on earth, and being all wise, they said, well, the point of life is to merge back into God. So they sat down in meditation and we're gone. And He thought, well, that didn't last very long. So how can I have a longer show? Let me create delusion. Let me create Maya. Let me create the iPhone 5. And that will keep them occupied. And so it has. And so we have to kind of move beyond these things to say, even for all the iPhones in the world, I still want God. And so I like my iPhone. I'm not dissing the iPhone, but I'm just saying still, there's a difference between the iPhone and God. And so, in terms of falling, what does it even mean to fall? There was a saint in India. His name was Sadhu Haridas, no relation to our Haridas. And this was about 300 years ago, and he was in India, and he was a miracle worker. He performed all kinds of miracles and inspired many people to follow God and so on. And some Christian missionary heard about him and said, well, let me teach this sort of, heathen about Jesus. And so the story goes. Sadhu Haridas and this missionary were on a boat together traveling somewhere, and the missionary started talking all about Jesus and why he was superior to any teacher from India. And and that you should follow him. And Sadhu Haridas said, well, what could your Jesus do that I can't do? And since they were in a boat, the missionary said, well, he could walk on water. And Sadhu Haridas said, is that all? And he jumped out of the boat and started walking on the water, and the boat followed him wherever he went. And so, of course, he sort of seemed to win the day, but there was a Raja, a king in that part of India, and he said to the people in his court, he said, I know you all admire him, but something's wrong, something's not right. And it was perhaps his desire to display all of these miracles. I don't know, but in any case, the Haridas fell, and he ended up falling in love with a woman and breaking his monastic vow and going off. And I'm sorry that that's always sort of, oh, the spiritual person fell because they got married. It's not always the case at all by any means, but in this particular story it was, because it was not his ultimate destiny. And he got caught by desire. And so we just think, okay, yeah, yes, you make a mistake and you must be punished, and he lost his spiritual realization and so on. But that's not the end of the story. He realized his mistake. He realized this life is not for me. And he went back to his guru and said, please take me back. And his guru said, fine. And at the end of his life, he was free. He was liberated. And when Yogananda first told that story to Swami, there was another student with them. And she said, but because he had been so high and then had made a mistake, shouldn't the punishment have been more severe? And Yogananda said, God is no tyrant. If you make a mistake and you realize it's a mistake, he takes you right back. And besides, when you fall from a great level of realization, you don't fall very far. He said, it's as if you fall from the 10th floor to the 9th floor, but you don't fall down to the ground. And so we have to keep that in mind in all cases. Now, what about a story we're more familiar with? There's the story of, who could have made the biggest mistake of all or been the baddest guy in the room? But Judas. People even use his name to mean, traitor and betrayer and so on. And what Judas did in betraying Jesus was, of course, a horrible thing. And, there's nothing good you can say about it. So Yogananda explained the reasoning in Judas's mind was not, I want them to kill Jesus. That seems to be a pretty dumb motivation, given that he'd given his whole life to Christ. But that he thought if he forced a confrontation between Jesus and the authorities, that Jesus would then reveal his divine glory in defending himself and protecting himself, and as fully showing everybody what he could do. Because the miracles he did, even though they were public, there was nothing before the authorities and so on. And so this would prove that he was the Messiah. So you can imagine, as we heard in the oratorio last night as Ramesha sang, let this cup pass from me. Let my heart not know so much pain. Must the love thou bearest thy children ever suffer such disdain? Would that I might reveal thy greatness. Even in that moment, as Yogananda explained, Jesus was saying, would that I could bring, as he says in the Bible, legions of angels and just wipe all of this out. But it was not God's will. Why? Because he wanted Jesus to die? Of course not. Because what is more impressive to say, okay, here you all are, okay, here I'm going to get Gabriel and Michael and they're just going to level all the police. Or that I'm going to die and come back and show you that I can conquer death, that I can be resurrected, that we all can resurrect ourselves from whatever trouble is crucifying us at the moment. But you can imagine Judas's reaction when Jesus let himself be taken and he committed suicide. Yogananda said he should not have committed suicide. He said even for such a mistake as Judas made, he should have retired into the mountains and meditated and basically asked for forgiveness for his mistake. So even Judas should have done that. Now that story doesn't end there. Yogananda said that he met Judas reborn in this lifetime, in Yogananda's own lifetime. He was a disciple of Ramakrishna. And he was Sarvananda, I think. No, Ramakrishna. And the disciple's name was Sarvananda, and you can look him up. And Yogananda met him, and he kept to himself. And he kept apart from the others. In fact, he was a little bit still attached to money, Yogananda said, and some of the disciples teased him for it. And Ramakrishna said, don't. Leave him alone. And Yogananda said Judas / Sarvananda was free at the end of his lifetime this time. Free. Just like Haridas in the other story, free. So when we think of Judas now, well, where is that soul? He's free. So what's there to be sad about? Yes, he made a big mistake. But the story didn't end there. And so he could be rightly called Saint Sarvananda. I can't quite say Saint Judas. But that is the case, though. Judas really became a saint. He became free in 2,000 years. And Yogananda said they were 2,000 painful years, obviously. But why so much pain, even? Is it God punishing him and saying, because you made that horrible mistake, I'm just going to turn the screws to you? No, it's the screws we turn to ourselves. As it said in the reading, this spiritual failure is such a deep disappointment to us personally. That's where so much of the pain comes. And we have to be careful. He let that pain overwhelm him to the point that he killed himself. Yogananda said that's actually the only way we can fail. He said, no matter what setbacks you encounter, never give up. He said, but if you say, I have failed, he said, then it will be true for this lifetime. He said, because when you say that, you close yourself off. He said, even God can't help you. He said, he is ticking in your own heart, and he can't help you because at that point you've closed yourself off to him. So let's just not do that, and then just keep trying. And so I thought about, though, what does spiritual failure even look like? I mean, we make a mistake. We're set up to make mistakes. This world, as I was saying, is full of Maya. So God digs this big pit and then covers it up with all these grass and leaves and everything and puts a sign on it that says, please step here, everything will be fine. And so we go, oh, and fall into the pit. Why would he be mad? He set the whole thing up for us. I mean, he expects us to fall into these traps. Why? So that we can learn. That's all. And so that we can grow. And this story, what is the secret to learning? What is the secret of growth? It's given in the reading. That there were the wise virgins that had the oil of devotion in their lamps, and they were the foolish ones. And we may even think that, well, I mean, that didn't seem very nice of the bridegroom to come, and those guys were out. I mean, couldn't he have waited for them? Was he in such a rush that he couldn't have waited and said, okay, I know you didn't get your oil, but that's all right. I mean, where's the forgiveness in that? And you could imagine one of them staying back and saying, even though I have no oil, I'm still going to wait anyway and say, I have nothing to offer you except this empty lamp. And wouldn't he have blessed her also? But it isn't that the Christ consciousness says, because you do not have enough devotion, I will not appear to you. It's because we don't have enough devotion that we can't perceive the Christ consciousness right here. It's here the whole time. As Yogananda said, God is ticking in your heart. So it is just a question of when our hearts are disturbed, when the feelings, the emotions rather, agitate us, then we can't perceive things clearly. And we see that in life all the time. As I mentioned not too long ago, I got really upset because I had a parking ticket that I hadn't paid in time. And so I knew the fine was going to be so much worse than it already was. Any fine is bad. But this was going to be bad upon bad, that I was late in paying my horrible parking ticket. And my emotions became disturbed, violently and audibly. And after finishing my little shrieking to the walls and ceiling and everything, and cursing just about every circumstance in my life and my own forgetfulness and everything, I went to pay the parking ticket and found that they had not applied the late fee to it for some reason. And so I thought, pay it before they figure it out. But it was a great lesson that I got all upset over nothing. Not even, because a fine is nothing. But I got upset over a non-fine, a fine that didn't even exist. And so that is the emotions, getting disturbed and failing to perceive things clearly. And so as we calm our feelings through meditation, then we can perceive the bridegroom. Christ often referred to himself as the bridegroom. And so realize that God wants to come to us. He's desperate to come to us. It's just that we have to go to perceive him inside. I know you can all hear me even though you can't hear me through this. But that's okay.
The battery?
Is it the battery? It is the battery. Very good. It's actually a joke. That's not my joke. That's Haridas's joke. Our Haridas, when we were teaching corporate workshops, we had to ask people, you have to pay us in advance of the workshop, when all these things. And so this one company hadn't, and he said, well, that'll be easy though. We'll just go up and say, gotta insert the coin before the talk will start. So we might even ask ourselves, what does spiritual failure look like versus spiritual success? I mean, ultimately, of course, we will be free in God. And it's just a question of how much time is it going to take. That's up to us. But so often, spiritual failure, I was thinking, I mistake outward failure for spiritual failure. I mean, suppose we're late, or we break something, or we, fail to succeed at something we were really trying. Is that spiritual failure? Not necessarily at all. It's our attitude that matters. We could fail in something and just say, okay, well, I guess that wasn't meant to be, or I learned a lot from it, and so on. Sometimes we can fail and decide, you know what, I'm just going to let this go. I'm not even going to get upset about it. And what that is, an outward failure actually becoming a spiritual success. So which one is more important? Outwardly, we can't ever succeed all the time. This world is not set up that way. The world is set up with duality. For every success outwardly, there has to be a failure. Inwardly, no. Inwardly, as I said, the duality is that we come back. But in terms of wanting it always to be up so that it's never down, it will never happen. This world is set up to give us all kinds of trouble. And so if the world is causing us trouble, we should say, great, the world is having a success at our expense. But it's doing its job. Swami Kriyananda was with Yogananda at the lake shrine, or in Sanitas, I can't remember now, clearing all this beautiful property and making it ready for an event, but there were all these gnats in the middle of this idyllic surrounding, and with his own master there were these gnats that were getting in their eyes and ears and everything. And Kriyananda said to his guru, why, in the midst of this beautiful place, do we have these pests? And Yogananda said, it's God's way of drawing us back to him, of reminding us this world is not our home. This world is a school. How many of us live at the school and say, oh, this is a great desk, thank you so much, and I love the pencil sharpener, and I love the pop quizzes, and I love the lunch, room and all that. I think I will live here. I certainly didn't want that at the school that I went to. And we always got to go home at the end, and so we will now. But again, spiritual success, what does it mean? Does spiritual success mean I have learned all the techniques and I have mastered them. And I can do 108 kriyas 108 times a day. I can meditate for 32 hours and so on in one day. That would be impressive. Not at all. Why? I mean, why do we meditate? Is it so that we can meditate? Is it because we're told we should meditate? Because meditation is a good thing? No. It has a purpose, which is for us to experience more of God. And so what else is spiritual success? Is it becoming a jivan mukta, freed while living? Or even better than that, a param mukta, which is when you've gotten rid of all your past karma too. So you're maybe slightly more of a saint than those regular saints. Of course, there's no ladder to climb. And what's the point of having the higher realization or even samadhi? Because it's something to focus on, to say, well, that's what success is. No. Samadhi means oneness, union with God. And so the only success is to love God, to merge with God, to love Him more. That's why we meditate. That's why we want to have more of God's consciousness in us and all these other things. They are the means to the end of fully loving and uniting with God. And that we can do at any moment. At any moment we can say, God, this whole thing is a mess and I just made it worse. All I know is I love you. All I know is I want truth. And I will not stop until you enter my heart forever. I just want to close with a reading from this book. Along the same line. The title is, I Will Be the Naughty Baby of Divine Mother. In the hall of life, decorated with mountains, stormy cataracts, and wild scenery, I have played long. Each time, when tired of play, I cried for thee. Thou didst drop down through the skylight of my heart's craving, some new doll of fame, friends, or prosperity to quiet me. This time, Divine Mother, I will play the naughty baby. I will sob unceasingly. No more shall the toys of earthly pleasures stop my cries. O Divine Mother, thou must come soon, or I will waken all creation with my cries. I will make all thy sleeping children wake and join me in a chorus of wails. Forsake thy busyness with the housework of thy creation. I demand attention. I demand thee. I no longer want thy playthings.